Alright, for this video I want to go over the Form 8863 and in particular the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit. So the 8863 can be filed for either the American Opportunity Tax Credit or the Lifetime Learning Credit. And so for this one we're going to go through a scenario where Jane Doe, our taxpayer here, is going to claim the Lifetime Learning Credit. So I've got the form in front of us. It's a two-page form, so we'll go through all the elements here. But first I do have one slide that just covers some of the background on this so you can get a sense of what the differences are between the AOTC and then the Lifetime Learning Credit. So again, the U.S. Has two types of education tax credits, right, and they're both claimed on this form. It's the AOTC and then the LLTC, right? Now there used to be an option to claim a itemized deduction for tuition and fees, expenses, so not a credit, but that was repealed, and so that is no longer an option. So now we just have these two credits. So the American Opportunity Tax Credit, this is generally the more favorable one, but it only covers the first 4 years of your post-secondary education. So in other words, after high school, when you go to university, those first 4 years of college and pursuing the degree, you get to claim the American Opportunity Tax Credit for those costs. Now, once you've claimed the credit for 4 years, then you're no longer eligible to claim the AOTC, and so that's where the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit generally comes into play, is when you have already claimed all of the credit available on the AOTC, but now you're still taking some classes, and then the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit might be an option for you. Okay, so the AOTC, again, this is generally the greater one, so the credit is up to $2,500 per student, and you can claim this multiple students on one return, right? So this often happens with parents that have multiple kids in college, right? If they're all dependents and you're paying their tuition, then you can claim the tax credits for them. So the credit is 100% of the first $2,000 of tuition, and then it's 25% of the next $2,000. So if you do the math there, that it's capped at $2,500 per student. Now the LLTC, a little different, right? So the credit's available for an unlimited number of years. So you can, if you're taking classes every year for 10 years, you can technically claim this credit. And so it's available even if you're not pursuing a degree. Now the credit is non-refundable. So what that means is that you can claim the credit and offset some of your tax, but if your tax is reduced to zero, you're not going to get a check from the government, right? There's no refundable portion, which in contrast, the AOTC does have a refundable element. All right. Now, the maximum amount of credit for the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit is $2,000 per return, so per tax return, and it's calculated as 20% of the eligible cost. So in other words, if you have $10,000 or more of tuition and fees, expenses, things like that, it's going to be capped at 20% of $10,000, so $2,000. So let's look at our fact pattern here. We have Jane Doe. She's 25, right? So she's out of college. She works full-time as a marketing assistant. So she's already completed her 4-year degree, right? And so the 4-year degree has already been completed. She's already claimed the AOTC, right? So that's no longer an option. Now she's also taking some classes in computer science, right? And at this point, it's part of a non-degree program. So she hasn't entered the program to get a full computer science degree. She's just taking these classes because she's kind of interested in them. So the total amount of tuition and fees she paid during the year, $2,050, and she did receive a 1098-T for the year that evidence the $2,050 was paid. So once we have that information, how does Jane complete her tax return? So the 8863, again, it's a two-page form. The first page is broken into parts 1, 2, and this is where you compute either the refundable portion of the AOC or the non-refundable education credit, which is what we're going to be working with. Now, before you start this form, you actually complete page 2 first, right? So if we jump down to page 2, this is where you would enter information for the American Opportunity Tax Credit or the Lifetime Learning Credit. So part 3, first, information on the student, right? So Jane Doe is the student here. So we have the student's social security number. Now, because Jane is filing her own return, all of this matches. But in a scenario where you're a parent and you're filing your return, you would obviously input the name of your children that are the students, right? So we got Jane's information here, the university she goes to in Atlanta. And question 2, did she receive a 1098-T? Yes, she did. And box 7 is not checked. Box 7 refers to costs that are incurred in a subsequent year, right? So basically, kind of there's a lag on the tuition payments made, but in this case, that's not what's happened. She paid all the tuition and fees during 2022, and so that's all that she's going to be reporting. She enters the EIN for the school, and then on line 23 here, note that it's asking us, have we claimed the American Opportunity Credit for any 4 prior years? And the answer is yes, right? This claim, the credit claim has already been levied on her returns, right? So she's no longer eligible as a student to be able to claim the American Opportunity Tax Credit, right? So as it asks us, go to line 31, so we can skip a lot of these elements here because, again, these questions and this section here applies to the American Opportunity Tax Credit, which we cannot take anymore, right? So the lifetime learning credit is what we have. There's our $2,050 in total qualified education expenses, and then that number is then flowing up to page 1 of the form, right? So page 1 of the form, we put the amount of expenses there on line 10. It's asking us enter the smaller of line 10 or 10,000, right? Because remember, it's a $10,000 cap. So if line 10 was, let's say, $30,000 in expenses, the most amount of credit she can calculate is 20% on 10,000. Okay, so it's the smaller of the two. So she's got $2,050 here in expenses multiplied by 20%. Gives her a tax credit of $410. All right. Now, the lines 13 through 16 here, what they're doing is trying to figure out if there's any phase out. So if you make what the IRS would consider too much income, then the amount of credit here would be reduced, potentially reduced to 0. In Jane's case here, because her income is below all of the relevant thresholds, she's not going to get a reduction in the amount of credit that she's going to be eligible for. All right, so the full $410 is going to be an eligible tax credit for Jane. So once she has the $410 amount, if we scroll up here, the credit is reported on Schedule 3, right, where we report all types of refundable or non-refundable credits. Schedule 3, Part 1 is non-refundable credits. Schedule 3, Part 2 is other payments and refundable credits. In this case, remember, the lifetime learning tax credit is a non-refundable credit. So she reports the education credit here on line 3, right, 8863, line 19. There's the 410. And then the 410 is ultimately reported up here on page 2 of her Form 1040. So we can see here the amount flowing through from Schedule 3, line 8, $410. So on her tax return, her total tax based on her income was $1,652. She gets a $410 reduction, right? So that reduces her total tax. And so now the adjusted amount of tax that she owes is $1,242. So she does get the full benefit of that education tax credit. All right, so that covers it for this video. I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment below. I do have a separate video on the American Opportunity Tax Credit, so I'll put a link to that in the description as well. And as always, I look forward to seeing you guys on the next video. So thanks so much and have a great day. Bye.